Hello, everyone. How's it going? Long time no see. How's everyone doing? Are you enjoying Global Hack Week so far? This is day one only, but I'm sure you have had some amazing streams before this, right? So, welcome everyone. Welcome to the Beginners Week. Okay. And I am so excited for this because this is where we start our journey again, right? We start building things right from ground up. This is where you would start your development journey in general. And I think this is the best part of Global Hack Week, which is for people who want to start small and get into things for the very first time. The beginners week is amazing place to be, right? So first of all, once again, thank you so much everyone for joining who have joined. And I see a ton of messages, so let me go over. Hello, hi, I'm glad that you are enjoying. And yes, recordings will be actually available on YouTube at the end of the session, so definitely go and check the Major League Hacking YouTube channel. Let me see if I can quickly share that with you all, right? Meanwhile, let me set some background music just so that when I am searching for things, the silence is not really awkward. Not okay. I think this is good. Perfect. So, uh, give me 1 second while I search for the YouTube channel link. There we go. So all the recordings will be available on the YouTube channel of Major League Hacking. Now, before we go ahead, first of all, let me introduce myself for someone who is very new to this. I've done some, I don't know how many. I should take a quick count later because I'm sure I'm nearing my 50th stream really soon. So I've done, like, let's say around 45 streams in the past. I've been part of most of the Global Hack Weeks, and my name is Utkarsh, but I prefer to go by UT because that's how everyone knows me. Okay. So if you have joined any hackathons, if you have joined my previous sessions, everyone knows me as UT, and love the excitement. Thank you. uh, Other than that, what are we going to be building today? We are going to, as I said, start our journey. Okay, and here's some hints to what we will be building. And if we finish our project 4 by, I don't know, I have like 4 sessions. So if by the fourth session we are done with all the projects, then I would love to show you some cool stuff that you could do in the browsers, uh, like disabling security or actually adding libraries and all those things. So yeah, we'll go over some cool stuff when we if we have time. And finally, before we go ahead, I would humbly request all of you to please register for the event. Okay, that would be really helpful. And you know I think in general, it's helpful to you as well. It would be helpful for me. It would be helpful for MLH, right? So please do register for the session. Would really appreciate it. And finally, one last note. Apologies for starting like 3 minutes late. My monitor was behaving weird for some reason, so I had to like just switch it off, switch it on twice or thrice. So yeah, I think now that intros, apologies, and instructions are out of the way, let's get started. Uh, Now I have created a repository for you all to follow along. So folks who said that they might be dropping off in the middle of it and they want to see or join back later, you would definitely want to follow along. Okay, in all my previous projects, I have always requested people to follow along in the coding, right? That ways you learn faster, you learn better. That's my opinion, personal humble opinion. And normally whenever I do some simple projects, I tend to go for uh, some online IDEs, just so that you don't have to do a setup. But in the case of HTML, CSS, you actually don't need any IDEs or anything. You don't have much setup. All you need to have is Visual Studio Code, which is what I'm going to be using uh, as an editor. But if there are any other editors that you like, which are readily available to you, you already have it downloaded, feel free to work with that. I mean, you can also work with Notepad if you're on Windows, or TextEdit if you're on Mac, but I wouldn't suggest it. I would definitely not suggest it. Okay. So if you don't have access to Visual Studio Code and you want it, the link is in the chat. It is a very simple text editor, which would which is where we would be writing our code. And plus you also get access to Copilot, okay, for free if you have a GitHub account, right? So add it, use it, use Copilot if you have to. I would be not using it for this specific session because I want you to learn by building it on your own. Again, if you're a beginner, uh, I would suggest that for this session, specifically for this session, just shy away from Copilot or anything, any other AI helper tools. Okay. Uh, okay. So I think that's good enough. That's good enough introduction. And with this, I think we can dive a bit into things. Let me see any questions. Is there a recording available for this class? Yes, it would be available on YouTube. There we go. Yeah, sure. Go for it. I know, right? Okay, so I think, yep, that is good. In the middle, I would be going away from screen just so that you can focus solely on code and not on my hand gestures, which I tend to do a lot sometimes. As you can see, can't really control doing hand gestures because I feel like I'm explaining it to a crowd sometimes. Uh, and it just makes it awkward because there's this like one circle where you see me, so you don't really see doing hand gestures, right? So yeah, with that, yeah, let's begin. I keep saying let's begin, but I don't begin anyways. Okay, so let's start with HTML. Okay, or let's start with web in general. Now, the whole idea of web, okay, web is not web browser, right? Web is anything that allows you connectivity over this long wire of electricity or electrons from one place to other, right? So you have this whole cables, sea of cables which connect countries, uh, and what web allows you to do is, yeah, just connect one system to other. Okay. Now, with the evolution of a web, where you could talk to someone, message someone, or play games with someone because you are connected over a very, very, very big world, there came the idea of, if I want to build something that I want the world to see, where do I put it? Okay. And initially, when someone would do something like this, they would actually put it on their system, okay, their own computer, and they would expose it to the world via their IP address. But these random numbers became really difficult to actually remember. Okay. So that's how The second concept came in, which was naming things. So a website like github.com is naming this random numbers, which if we call the IP address, with a text which is easy to remember. Okay. So that's how the idea of naming came in. Okay. Now, when like a million people made something called as their own page, their own code, or they wanted to build some type of code which should be readily shareable. Like initially, it started with just what texts, right? So just simple .txt files on Notepad is what you would share over the web. And this became difficult for people who wanted structure. What you want is that whoever sees or downloads this txt file or some kind of text, it should be easily parsable, it should be easily readable. And that is the whole idea of creating this markup language, the html that we say, the hypertext markup language, which was initially you had text that you would share with people, but now you could share a hypertext, which is an evolution over the text. Why? Because it adds some structure. So the very first HTML, the HTML 1.0 or 1, you could say, was created in 1993, which is so close. It is like it's younger than my dad, right? Definitely. Uh, Younger than someone's like brothers. It is just what few years older to me. So it was very basic markup. And then in next 4 years, okay, so 1993 to 1997, HTML1 in 1993, HTML4 in 1997, that added the tables and the forms. That forms is the big thing in any web page that you go, like any website you go right now, there will be a form. Okay, it's a rarity to not have that. So in 4 years, that's how fast HTML progressed. And then in 2000s, a superset of HTML came in, which was XHTML, and that tried to make HTML more structured. Okay, till now, HTML was structured, but not that much. Example, even in today, if let's say you miss uh, doing something, okay, like you add some start something but don't close it, there's this idea of closing things. You don't close it, your browsers don't actually give you an error about it. Okay, so XHTML try to make HTML more structured, and our HTML5, which is the current standard, which introduced a lot of something called as semantic elements. Okay, that came in 2014. So 1993, and like 20 years later, HTML5, which is the current standard. And like in last 10 years, there hasn't been much change. Like not any major breaking changes actually in HTML. Okay, so HTML5, our current standard. And you could say that HTML, I'm saying even though it hasn't changed as much, it hasn't changed a lot, it hasn't, there's no breaking changes. The way you write HTML is kind of still the same. It's still constantly evolving. Okay. There are teeny tiny bits that are changed every 1 or 2 years. You can find that out. uh, some attributes added, some things like not exactly removed but said that don't use this. Example, to make a text bold, there would be like a b tag. To make a text italic, you would have I tag. Okay, something like something called as tags. Then came a time where it was highly discouraged. It's still not removed, you could still use it, but it's highly discouraged. And you have something which is more semantic, which would be like strong tag or emphasize tag, all those things. Now The first ever website that was created is still online. So let's check that out. There we go. The first ever website. I will share the link in the chat as well. So this is the homepage or the of the first ever. Like how many years? 30, 30 years, right? 30 years ago. First ever website. Browse the first website and you could actually go. I'll zoom in a bit. And this is what it is. Okay. The first line mode browser. Learn more about the birth of the web. To learn about Tim Berners-Lee, and of course about CERN. Right. Interesting how a physics place actually gave birth to internet. Perfect. So definitely when you get time and if you feel a bit nostalgic and you are interested in learning about history or just checking it out, definitely check this website out. Okay. So with that, now I am a person who likes to dive into things directly with projects, which is sometimes a bad idea, but I've found that in a web development scenario, that is the best idea. Like dive directly into it, see what is being done, and that's how you will learn it. Okay. So now this is the cue for you to actually clone this repository. I will share the link in the chat again. I am sure we had a Git and GitHub session before this, like not just before this, but we had it sometime between yesterday and today. If not, and you are confused about what is the meaning of clone, what am I talking about? Fear not, because this is actually getting started. Yeah, there was a Git good with Git, like get good with Git, something like that, right? Excuse me. Sorry, that was a big sneeze. Sorry about that. Uh, okay, yeah, there was a Git with Ryan Lalo, and yeah, I would say that must have attended it. If you haven't, let's get into it quickly, very quickly. So what you need, like when I say clone, for people who don't really understand what I'm saying, they if you click on this green or blue depending on what your browser settings are, you will get this local code spaces and copilot, right? And in local you have the clone of https ssh github cli. Go for https and copy URL to clipboard. So this should give you a URL which would be very similar to what the link that I shared, but with a .git added at the end of it. Okay. Now what you need on your system is Git. Okay. So I can share the link to download Git on your system. So depending on your system, Windows, Mac, Windows, like even on Windows, you have like 64-bit or something, or Linux, any system that you are on, go for the standalone installer and just keep choosing whatever is default chosen. Okay, go through the steps. Once you go through all of that, you should have Git downloaded on your system. And once you have Git, then you could use it by going on your terminal. Like if you are on Windows, then you can go into CMD actually. If you are on Mac, you could go into your terminal. Uh, Okay. Uh, let me. Hmm, okay. Okay. So once you're there, you all have to do is git clone, and whatever you copied from here, from this local, just copy that, paste it, and hit enter. That should clone everything on your system. And then you have to open it in VS Code. So if you have VS Code installed for all users, it should have added the shortcut. But if it hasn't, you can just, of course, open VS Code and go on to File, open folder, and choose the folder. Okay. Or if you have it added on your, like, kind of installed on the path, as we say, then you can do from your terminal code space dot, and that should open this folder. Okay, the dot means the current folder, but let's say I don't want the current folder. I want to open the, what's it, HTML CSS JS mini projects. So code space, the folder name, hit enter, and that should open the HTML CSS JS mini projects folder. I have it already open, so I'm going to go directly into that. Once you have it opened, you should see exactly what I am seeing, which is what's on the website. There is a single file called as readme.md. Uh, oh, someone's using Arch Linux. Okay. Process should be exactly the same, I feel. Yeah, there should be exactly one file in this, what we call a repository. Now, in this file, there is a title and there is some description, right? So you can actually, in your VS Code, if you do a Control Shift P or Command Shift P, you, yeah, Control Shift P or Command Shift P, or you can actually go into settings and command palette, is it? Yes, command palette. And then you have a bunch of options. So I have an option which is open, like search for markdown. Okay, markdown, open preview to side. So you can see exactly what you would actually see on GitHub, right? So this is the description, and these are the 4 projects that I have on my mind, so that when we learn the whole HTML, CSS, JS, along with that, I have this very kind of teachery vibe where I give you homework, okay? And that is only if you are interested in exploring it a bit further and you want to learn a bit more. Definitely try and attempt the homework. Okay, I do this funny quotes because, yeah, you don't have to exactly. Also, it is not there are no prizes for completing it. There is nothing, at least in my session, for doing that. It's just if you are interested or curious about learning about it and you are interested in doing things. Okay, so the 4 projects that I have on mind, which would be one, a simple Pomodoro timer, which is kind of a standard for learning nowadays, it seems, where you set a timer for 25 minutes. That is your work time. And then you have a 5-minute break. So 25 minutes work, 5-minute break, 25 minutes work, 5-minute break. Helps people be more productive. So we'll build a simple web page. Okay, where you can set this timer. You'll have buttons to start, pause, stop the timer, or reset the timer. uh, you'll It will show you how much progress has been made, so a progress bar. uh, yeah, very simple. Then a box shadow generator, which would be to generate CSS box shadows, which we'll see in a bit. uh, a library page and expense tracker. We'll get into description as and when we start building them. Okay. Now, once hopefully you all have reached this at this point. Okay. Anyone who is lost, it's like confused exactly what's happening. We learned about downloading Git, cloning things, and Yeah, that's it. Perfect. I have received a go ahead, so I am going to go ahead. So, the first thing that I am going to urge you all to do is create a file called as index.html. Now, the naming of this file is very, very, I would say, interesting slash peculiar, because when a browser, okay, in this case, Chrome, Firefox, or any other browser actually, what else is this? The Safari, Brave. Yeah, these are some that I remember. Now, any browser that opens a website, oh, Microsoft Edge, how could I forget that? Microsoft Edge. So, any browser that opens your website or web page, let's say, it tries to search. First thing it does is tries to search for index.html. Why? Because that is the entry point to your website. Normally, when you have a web page or website or whatever you call it, uh, and you're running that website, you have those slash marks, right? Like slash something. And what that means is you're going into specific folders to search for something. And that's fine. You can always go into specific folders to search for something. But at the root of your website, or when your website is loaded for the first time at the root of your domain, like example, when we go to getscm.com, this is the root of the website, okay? And if I hit enter, the first thing it is going to search is, like, when someone hits this root URL, what is your index.html? What does that say? I want to download or search for that first. So that is like the naming convention, is it's for that. Sometimes you can also go for like slash index.html, as I did, and it still loaded the same page. Okay. But if I do this 123.html, that page does not exist. Okay. Right. So index.html, it's a very specific thing that is your entry point or your root of your application. So you can, like, for most of the websites actually, uh, let's try it on github.com. Like, unless you have some specific settings, for every website that you have, you can do a slash index.html, and that should ideally, most of the times, load that same page. In this case, it looks like it is not going to, unfortunately, because they must have some additional checks right there, which does not match it. But we saw that on Git, it works. Okay, they are serving an index.html first. Yeah. Okay. So that's about index.html. So we want our entry point to be called index.html. So that's why I've urged you to create that. Now, let's start with structuring this page. Now, the name of the file suggests it is index.html, but still, you should define a doc type, okay? Which is for browser to understand that this is like, the file extensions don't really matter to the browser uh, most of the times, but nowadays it has become much more intelligent in that scenario. But your convention is to define a doc type. Now you can do html, html5, html4, all those things, but html means using the latest version. Also, my throat is parched, so let me give me 1 second. It's too cold. My throat goes dry very so fast. Okay, so yeah, your doc type is for defining what is the document type, which is HTML, and using the latest version. Then you can define, like, and now this is the beginning of your app, the HTML code or HTML syntax, I would say. So if I start this, then I get a suggestion saying that provide a language, which should be the norm. So the language is, it helps define the language of an element. So you can have language like French, German. In our case, I am going to go with English. So I'm going to do EN and then just hit enter. So you might have noticed that as soon as I start doing something, like I do this angle bracket, a tag, and I close it, and it closes this. Okay, there's this closing thing, which is angle bracket forward slash the theme name and closing. So that is your closing. What else? So now, your HTML content is divided into two parts. There's the head part, which is something that a browser would read first, and there's the body part, which the browser would show to the user. The head part is not shown to the user. The head part is for browsers to interpret and add some things, remove some things, download additional files. So all those things are defined in the head part of the HTML content. The body part is what actually you see on the page. So example, in our git scm index.html, I go over to the right, clear everything, and empty cache and hard reload this whole page, and let's wait for it to be downloaded. In the elements tab, if you go and go into the head part, these are the things that happened in the background, or these are the settings that were added in the background for this HTML page. Some stuff, it's not exactly shown except for this title. So this title is what you see here on the top of your, like, each tab, right? So except for this title, nothing. Okay, actually, when the fav icon is shown, okay, which is the icon that you see next to this, and everything else, well, like, what is this, these are settings that are added to your browser. And it also says to download this JavaScript files. Okay, so yeah, that's what happens in the background. But what you see is when you hover over the body, this is what you are actually seeing on the website. So anything that is inside here, like let's say fast version control, or there's a form, as I said, like the most important thing. uh, there's this masthead which has, like, if you keep going inside, Git is a free and open source distributed version control system. So all these things are what you actually see, and that is contained in the body of your HTML. So you can divide any web page into two parts, HTML and CSS. That's what we understood. Index.html, it's the first thing that gets looked at, and it gets downloaded. And the initial HTML looks like this. So if you see a preview of it, it is not as colorful and structured as you see it by the browser. But this is what the initial things look like. Initially, what the HTML looks like without your styling, the CSS. So let's start by doing that. Let's define the head of our project, and let's define the body. Okay. A few more things that I want you to add to your VS Code before we move ahead. Why? Because I think these things would be helpful. They faster your development. They make your development quick. So you can go into these extensions. Okay, this extensions tab. There's a shortcut Shift Command X or Shift Control X. That should do it on Windows. Let me try Shift Command X. Yep, extensions. And things that I want you to add. The first one is this auto rename tag, which is so that if you rename something on the top, like if I change this head to heading, it should also rename the closing tag. Okay, easy, makes it like really easy. So auto rename tag, that is one thing that I would suggest. uh, Color highlight, this was something that I recently started using and I love it. It highlights any colors that you write, which will be very helpful when we start writing CSS. uh what else? Download and keep ESLint, really helpful for any linting issues in JavaScript that might happen, but we are not going to set it up right now. So just download it and keep. What else? Live server. So you will see that to open index.html, there is like one way to open it. There is another way, which is live server. Okay, live server makes your laptop a server. What is a server? Server reads files in a folder and it adds, like, opens it in a URL using Node.js, or some other kind of local server which serves your files. Okay, it's very difficult to explain right now until we actually do it one way, and then we'll understand this other way. uh, what else? So live server is one thing. Prettier, yes, definitely download Prettier. Helps you format files, like these many types of files. uh, so that I think that's all uh, that are good for now. Actually, even web accessibility, yes, I think you should add this as well. Okay, so add web accessibility extension as well. So web accessibility, Prettier, live server, ESLint, color highlight, and auto rename tag. These are some extensions that you should have. They make your life very easy. Okay, so now that we understood a bit more about the head tag, the body tag, and one part, the other part, now let's start with what goes in the head. Or actually, before we do all of that, let's open this in a web browser. So I'm going to reveal it in Finder, and for me it shows that there's this Chrome symbol. So if I double click on this, it should actually open it in Chrome directly for me. But you could also drag and drop it. So you can see that it is actually opening this file by going on this particular path and opening the index.html. And I'm also going to do a right click inspect to see the code in action. There are some styles that are added by default, but everything else is what we have written. And if I do a reload again, as you can see, my browser tries to fetch this document and get this document from this URL. The URL is my file system. Okay, let's move on ahead and write a bit of code. I want to start, yeah, this and write. Perfect. So first thing that we will do is add a title. Okay. So closing automatically closes. GHW Beginners Week. This is the title. And then right click and format document with. You could choose Prettier, which is what you recently installed, or you can go with HTML language features. I'm going to go with Prettier. And to format, the shortcut is Option Shift F or Alt Shift F on Windows, I'm assuming. So this is what it looks like after format. Properly aligned with, like, yeah, it's much more aligned, I would say, when you do a formatting. You could always not have a formatting, and the web page doesn't affect the web page. This is for your editor to look better, so that when you are reading your code, it is beautifully aligned. Let's say that. Going to format it again, and we added a title. Now the name title suggests that it should be uh, easily visible on the page, but unfortunately it's not. But where is the title? So if I go over here, right on the top where it says index.html, it should have started showing the title, but it's not. So I will reload the page, and now there we go. Okay, there is the title. Okay, now what else? Next to the title, there is this default icon that we have, the default fav icon, if I may say. Multiple other ways to, like, we can always have other icons to show there. So let me get a fav icon if I can find. Yep, found it. So if you want the MLH fav icon, all you have to do is visit this. Just saying, copyrights to MLH. Okay, they belong to MLH. So all you can do, like, you can simply just download, open image in new tab or save image as, and download it. Okay, so that's what I would suggest. Let me quickly download it and save it in a folder. I'm going to rename it to fav icon. So there we go. Fav icon has been downloaded of MLH, uh, and we could add it right here. So the way to add it is, let's see how others do it first. So the way others do it is you have a link tag where there's something called as href, and then a slash favicon.ico, then some rel and some type. Okay, let's try this idea. So you do a link tag. Okay, and if you start it, what about the closing? Why did it not automatically close? Okay, we had to do this. So the reason is that link tag is a self-closing tag. So there are some tags which are self-closing. You don't have to explicitly define their closing. So link tag is one of them. And then inside this link tag, you want to give the URL to this particular favicon.ico. So to give the URL, you use this specific something called as attribute. So link is a tag, but href is an attribute. Okay, and inside this href, we want to give a link to this. Now head tag changed. What? Yes. uh href. Okay, favicon.ico. How do we link this? Now, we have seen that if you want to actually download a index.html file, you could actually give it this complete path. But you can also do another thing, which is give a relative path. So I know that in this current folder, I can do a dot slash, which would, I'm confused, sorry. What changed on my head tag? Oh, okay. Thanks. Finally, I understood what we are talking about. I would have missed that. But interestingly, it did not show the error until I actually reload this, right? So if I do that, and still it's working out. Uh, and this is when I was talking about how HTML does not really care about some things. Okay, the browser does not really care. So link tag. So from this current folder, relatively there is this path to favicon.ico that I want to go. So if I do a command click, if you hover over it, you see, like if you see this underline, it says follow the link. To do that, it takes you to this particular file, opens this particular file. So we know that our path is perfect. So that is the href. And if I just do a closing right here, go over here, reload this, doesn't work. Okay, what else are we missing? We need to tell it that what is the rel, which is what is the relationship of this link tag that you're adding to this current document, to this index.html. So in our case, it is the relationship that this is an icon. Okay, so let's close it again, go back and reload, and there we go. Now that it knows the relationship, it works it out perfectly. There are some more things that you could add. So like, let's say, what did Git do? It said that the relationship is not just an icon, but it is a shortcut and icon. And what is the type of this image? So you can say that, like, you can think of type as what we normally think of type, right? Which is it a type JPEG, PNG, video, or all those things? In our case, there's this specific type that you can provide. Uh, there you see. So there are these types like HTML, CSS, text. You can have video, you can have PNG images, and all those things. So these are called as MIME types. So let's find a very good link about what are different or common MIME types. You can have octet stream as well. Oh, bad idea. Yeah. So these are some common MIME types that exist. As I said, JPEG, PNG, HTML, all those things. So I will share a link to this MIME types in the chat. Also, once again, thank you everyone who pointed out that I had forgotten, like I blundered in a way of the head and link tag. Okay, so MIME type, and there should be at least on this. Uh, Interesting. What about image? Okay, so apparently not exactly visible, but for your fav icon, okay, for your fav icon, your commonly used MIME type is, oh, do you think it would be here? Image slash X. Oh, apparently not. Interesting. So normally for your favicon, the image type is like the type is image slash X dash icon, but apparently it's not really necessary to add it. I would have always thought, and I never bothered to check it, that it is not an officially listed MIME type. Okay, so it kind of could ignore it and it still would work out the way we are thinking it should. So let's get rid of it. Anything that's not on the official list, we can get rid of it. And we are what this is what we are left with, and this works, we know that for sure. Reloading this. Okay, uh if you move after this like HTML web development, you move into React world and you use a link tag in the index.html, which is, we say the word self closing, but you don't put a forward slash, you might face errors when you deploy your website. Okay, so in React world, anything that is self closing needs to have this forward slash and then closing angle brackets. Okay, so just to put it out there, you can make it a habit because this again would not change anything, okay, for you. So yeah, that is about our link tag and that is about our self closing. You can make it a habit, it will not affect any other web page, but when you move out to React and single page web applications and stuff, and you don't have that forward slash and closing for self closing tags, then in that case it might error out. It does error out for sure. So yeah, make it a habit of anything that is self closing, add a forward slash and closing angle brackets. Okay, uh, a request here which is actually kind of fulfilled, so thank you so much, but I will still take an effort. There is auto rename tag that we want, color highlights, ESLint, live server, prettier, web accessibility. Yeah, I always like pronounce it so badly. Okay, so these are the things that we want for sure. Okay, so now that this is out of our way, now while I like this and it works most of the times, uh, where I reload the page, I don't really enjoy it. So that is where the live server would help us. So you should have it. If you have installed the live server, you'll have it in the bottom. Or I think if you go into command palette and search for live server, not liver, live server, there's this open with live server option that you can have. So I'm going to say that for this index.html, start it on live server, and there we go. There is our live server, which is running on 127.0.0.1 colon port number, which is 5500 slash index.html, which is the current file it is loading. What if I remove this? Do you think it will work? Yes, it does. Okay. So that's our live server. And what is now question for all of you? You don't have to answer it right now. What is 127.0.0.1? Okay. This is, you can think of this as an IP address. Okay. So remember the whole scenario that we were talking about, that, oh, IP address is very difficult to remember. I need words there. So this is a scenario. Okay. So question for all of you for later, like do research about what is this 127.0.0.1. Okay, and the next part where I said that this is an IP address, and this one is pretty easy to remember, but IP addresses got converted to having names, and the name, yes, as everyone is saying, it's localhost. So you could actually do, uh, instead of having this IP address of 127.0.0.1, you can replace this with localhost colon port number, hit enter, and that should do the exact same thing. Okay, that should still work out. And the way to check it is you have to add something in the body tag for it to be visible on the screen, right? So inside this body tag, I am going to just say, hey, and I go over. I don't have to reload, as you can see, even though I did that. Sorry. You don't have to reload. It reloads automatically. That is why the live server, okay, it changes instantly to whatever you have done on your index.html, let's say. So live reloads, you could say, automatic live reloads, and whatever I wrote is actually visible here. Okay, so, and it's on localhost. You don't have to go to the IP address, which is very difficult to remember sometimes, right? So that is the head tag, the body tag. Now let's go into some more development. So some basic tags that you should know, and I'm not going to dive deep here. Some basic tags that you should know is, the first one is a div tag. Okay, the div is like a division, so you could divide the elements. Now, as it says, it's not exactly, there's no special meaning to it, but the way we use it is to divide elements into chunks or blocks. Okay, so if I have this first div tag, and inside this I can have a hey, so this is my first chunk, and after this I can have another div tag, close it, and I can have a hello, and let me format the document, which is done. So it has divided it into like two chunks, and now these chunks, if I go over to my page, they are one below the other. Now inside this, like normally you would not add text very blankly, or I don't exactly know the word, but you would wrap it in something like, is it a heading, is it a normal text, is it code, or like, there are so many semantic elements that exist. So one is called as h1 tag, which is the heading. So there is hey, then you can have a h2 tag, which is like, let's say, hello h3 that exists. So I'm losing hey hi, so I'm going to say h3. There's a h4 that exists, so h4, h5 that exists. Okay, so h5. There's a h6 as well, so let's go with h6. You can have h7 as well, which is h7. You can have a h8 as well, so h8. Okay, and now let's go over. So h1, h2, h3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 and do not exist, just by the way. But as you can see, there is no error. Like, you would expect an error or some problems, but there isn't any. And if I go over to inspect, and I go over in, like, in the body, there's div and h7, h8, the browser is specifically okay with showing these elements, but it loses this styling. So if I zoom in a bit, you can see that these h tags, they are varying sizes and varying weight. Okay, yeah, varying weights, but 7 and 8 are not. So that's how we know that these don't exist. So just by the way, you have the h1 tags from h1 to h6. You can absolutely write h10, h11, the browser will be like, oh, I'm pretty sure I don't have a definition for this, so let me just show it as a simple text. Okay. So that is a reminder that you have H1 to H6. Those are officially your heading tags, and you can read more about them. Or let me see if I can find. Mm, Perfect, found it. Uh, there we go. So that should give you a list of all the HTML elements, HTML tags that exist. And the H tags are section headings, and H1 is the highest and H6 is the lowest. Okay. So anyone who's watching the video later, please do watch the whole thing. Don't be confused about what about H7. There's nothing like H7, but it still works. That is what I wanted to point out, that the browser does not actually differentiate. It just sees things. It tries to render those things on the screen, and if it finds something which does not exact, like the definition of which does not exist, it shows it as a normal thing, a normal text, let's say. So there's H tags. Then you have P tags, which is the next thing. So what is a P tag? It represents a paragraph, and they are again as simple as a text. So if I do a P tag here and I do, this is a paragraph. Let's go over, and there we go. This is a paragraph. Now, visually, if you see this, between the div tag, I had added this hello from div, and between that and this is a paragraph. Do you see any difference? Actually, let me copy paste this exact thing. Dash P, and then I would do a dash D right here. Between the font sizing, the gapping, or anything, there's no visual difference to adding a paragraph tag or adding text directly between the div, but it's a bad idea. Okay. Don't like, if you want to show some text to the user, uh, and if it's a big chunk of text, there's, it's like the name says paragraph. Okay, it's a big chunk of text. uh, Even if it's not, actually go for P tag. Okay, that is what you would find on all web pages. So even here, if I go over to this, Git is a free and open source thing, it is wrapped in a P. So the div is your like block of content. Inside that there is this one text, then you leave some space, and then they have some more text. Okay, everything is wrapped inside a P tag. And this is the first div, and then there's the second div, right, which has again some other element. So you divide your contents into blocks using div, and you use the heading for like the H1 tag or H2 tag for your heading or section headings, and you use your P tags for any text that you want to show to the user. Okay, do not ever, like, you can do it, there's no problem, don't do it. It's a bad idea. It's not semantic, it's not, it does not follow the convention of HTML. So follow the convention, it makes your life easy, and it makes the life of the next person who reads your code easier. Okay, so that's about our index.html and some of our semantics. And I think I'm not going to dive deep into more semantics right now because this is it for the time being. So in our case, let's in the first, like in the div tag, okay, let me also remove this. In the h1, we'll say welcome to GHW Beginners Week. Uh, and then in below this, I'll have a p tag, which would be like, let's get started with the projects. Let's go over to our GHW Beginners Week, and oops, too zoomed in. Let me zoom out, and there we go. Perfect. And now let's style this. Okay, let's style this a bit so that it adds a bit of pizzazz, a bit of flair to this whole thing. Now, uh, there is this particular CSS that I have found, which is so basic, so minimal, yet it will make any website which does not have like a ton of CSS, which is very simple website with very basic CSS, it will make any website more readable, more user friendly, uh, much more better looking. Okay, and it is called 58 bytes of CSS. So if you go over to this link, and I think this is the bare minimum CSS. Okay, the bare minimum CSS that works well. So now what they have is there's this main and then this. So like before we go into all of that, let's create a style.css. Okay, now the name suggests that this is for styling, and the syntax for styling something is you first add what do you want to style. So the tag or attribute or class name or something like that goes here. So I would say tag name goes here. Then you have curly brackets opening and closing, and inside here you have your CSS things. Okay, select uh, or the styling, you can say not exactly commands, but styling attributes, styling syntaxes, or how do you want it to be styled. Okay, now in the tag name you can go with the whatever tags you have used. So like one of the tags that I have used is HTML, so I can actually style the whole HTML. uh, and the way to do it is, as I said, like you have multiple things. What's the best thing that I could do right now, which will show you all? And I would say that would be changing the color of the font. So if I do a color and then I can choose from some colors that exist, I'm going to go with crimson. Format document with configure prettier, and I go over to our GHW Beginners Week, nothing happens because I have not linked my style sheet to my HTML. So let's do that. So to link a style sheet is the way we link a fav icon. You do a link. Should not have done this. Otherwise, like how will I actually show it to you? But just to follow the semantics. So you first give a relation. What is the relation between this whole document? And then you give the link or the URL to that. So I'm going to say from this current folder, go to the style.css, which is my file name, and it goes over properly. And now if I come over, it's styled, right? So there we go. That is a style which styles the whole HTML document. Now, you could be specific to styles as well. So like, I don't want to style the whole document because, well, head is not exactly styled. Do you see GHW Beginners Week being styled? Even if I reload, it's still white because that's how it's set. It's not exactly styled. So it doesn't make sense to style the whole HTML, let's say, for this example. I want to be specific that style the body only. And instead of crimson, let's go with some other color, aquamarine. Not exactly visible to people, but it is there, and it styles the body, which does the exact same thing. I can be more specific that I want to style the div only. Change it to, let's say, blue. Excuse me. Come over, and it's blue. Everything is still blue. Uh, I can be more specific. I want to style only H1. And I want, what other colors do I have? Uh, Dark golden rod. Okay. And now we are becoming specific. Okay. I only want the H1 to be styled. So it's this golden rod, dark golden rod color. And the P tag does not get styled. You can be more specific. Okay. How do you get more specific? You can actually, like, let's say if I have another H1 in another div. So if I go over to a div tag and I have a H1 tag saying uh, this is a test H1. I've only styled H1. I go over that this is a test H1 is also styled because I've said that for all H1 tags, style, like, change the color. But now I want to be specific. How do I be specific? So I can give a H1 tag something called as a ID. Okay. I am so sorry. Should mute myself. Yep. So I can give something called as an ID, and I can give the ID name as first H1. Okay, dash H1, dash underscore, no, nothing should, anything should work except for spaces. Spaces not allowed. So you can do first H1 without any space. This is fine. You can do a first dash H1. This is also fine. Under single underscore is fine. Double underscore is fine. Whatever. So I'm going to go with a single s and, like, actually a dash. And I take this first H1, and instead of H1, I say first H1 should be colored this. I go over, nothing is colored. Why? Because when we were doing H1 div body, these are some official tags that exist, but ID, it's an attribute to H1. Okay. And this attribute, to tell CSS that this is an attribute, you use a hashtag. And now if I go, only the first H1 is colored and everything else is black. Perfect. What else? Now I want H2, and this would be H2 test. Okay, H2 test. I want this to be colored same as the first H1. So there are multiple ways to do it. I could do a H2 and do it, but that would affect everything. I know that first H1 ID has a color, dark golden rod. I want to kind of copy it over. So I could potentially copy this ID, go over to H2 and add it here. And if you see, it works. Okay. But this is where you need to stop. Why? Because ID, the definition of ID in a semantic HTML is that it is supposed to be unique. Okay. When you use a HTML ID, you use it from the idea that an ID is a unique thing. Okay. We do not have duplicate IDs in a single page. So try and keep it unique. So what do I do now where I can duplicate the color without breaking the rules of good HTML or semantic HTML? And that is where, yes, the answer is where class selector comes in. Okay, so instead of ID, I do a class here. And similarly here, I will change the ID to class. Go over, and nothing is styled. Interesting. So one other change is that instead of a hashtag, which is ID, I have to do a dot, which is for selecting a class. And if I go over, and there we go again, works out perfectly fine. So that is our ID. Slipping from the chair, sorry. That is our ID and our class. Okay, I hope that makes sense. It works. Like every time I say this, like people when they read something, they're like, oh, cannot use IDs. No, you can use it. Cannot use H7, you can use it. Browser does not understand it. It's not semantic enough. Don't do it. If you can avoid it, please do avoid it. Okay, and yes, you can avoid it. Okay. And millions of websites, probably billions of websites that exist which follow semantic rules. So if they can, you always can. So there we go. Now, this now once you have reached this stage, now everything comes down to naming as well. So the first H1 is a class name that we have given, and H2 has a class name of first H1. Anyone who's reading the code would be like, huh, definitely not an H1. So always try to give naming which is more generic. So I can give this a naming as what? Multiple things to think about. But whenever you want to think for a name, you lose it. And that is a problem in computer science. There are two major problems in computer science. One is naming things. Second is invalidating caches. And third is off by zero. So two major problems, or off by one actually, not off by zero, off by one. Made my joke redundant there, but off by one. So these are two major problems in computer science. Anyone who understands it understands it. So I can say, like, anything that is going to be a title, okay, I want that to be colored dark goldenrod. So that makes much more sense. That, oh, this is a title. So that is like one section, one title, one section, another title. Okay. Uh, Perfect. So that's what I wanted to show. Let's get rid of this div. H1, you can leave it. Color, don't really like it. So you can have colors by not just having names, but having something called as RGBA definitions, right? So in VS Code, you can actually hover over things and get a proper color. It gives you this RGB color. But also, I just realized this is what we were not here for. The best CSS, the minimal best CSS. So let's go over and see what CSS exists. So there is this something called as margin auto. There is a max width and there is a padding. So more description below, but in our case, we love understanding by doing it. So I'm going to go over and say, like, for the whole HTML, just add this. Let's go over, and there we go. Okay. So what has it done? And we can see what it has done by hovering over this whole HTML. And once you do that, and in your inspect element, you can see there is a margin. Okay, at the outermost thing to any element is a margin. There's a margin on the left hand side, there's a margin on the right hand side of 168. Okay, so 168, there's nothing which tells here 168. So what happens if I like reduce or increase this? So as you can see, that margin keeps changing. So the margin, it is depending on how much is the visual area, it adds a margin. And this margin says that it has added an automatic margin on all sides. So the browser will make this calculation like, okay, I have space here. Let's add that. I don't have space. Let's remove it. Or let's, if someone is squeezing the page and there is more white space or less white space or whatever, we'll adjust the margin automatically. But you can always define margins which are more specific. Now, one of the way, like there are multiple units, the way we have meters, kilometers, centimeters, units to measurements, you have multiple units here as well. So one of them is pixels, which is normally or commonly used, 10 pixels. So if I do that, and if I go over and hover this, now you can see there is a margin on all sides as 10 pixels on all sides. Okay, that's interesting. When we had auto, at that time, there was nothing on the top and just very randomly on the left and right. But when I do 10 pixels, it's actually applied on all sides. Now, if I zoom, like squeeze in, or squeeze out, the margin still remains the same. Okay, and this whole thing is not center aligned anymore. But when I had auto, things become kind of center aligned to the whole screen, the whole visual area. So that's what we learned about CSS. There's a padding, which is, but before that, there's a border as well. So let's try adding a border. I'll remove this. So margin auto, then border. Now border, let's say 2 pixels. I want to add a border of 2 pixels to everything. Also, let me add it to the body first. Okay. Yep. So the whole body that has a border. Where is the border though? What happened to that border? So if you can see, there is a margin auto. There is a border of 2 pixels, but it's not visible. Okay. Let me define the border a bit more. I want to be the border to be solid and it needs to be color blue. Let's see if that works. There we go. And now it is visually, it's there visually. So when you add a border of, let's say, just 2 pixels, it is not sure that what is the border style and border color. You can actually break it into 3 elements. Let's say border dash style, and these are the options that you have. Like let's say there is a ridge, and you can have a border dash color, which is where we define the color. Let's say go for brown, and instead of this I go for 10 pixels, and that is our border. Okay, the ridge kind of border. Actually, let me go for 20 pixels. You see this frame like thing that comes in. So what else? We have dashed border, we have solid border that we saw. So all those things, you can see the margin is auto, border is added, but it kind of messes up with, actually not exactly messes up, from HTML perspective. Let's say there is a margin of 8 pixels everywhere now, and the border, it's there. It's like this very weird things here. So what we would do is I want to actually divide it into HTML margin auto, and for body I don't want margin auto, I want to show the border. Perfect. And now things are looking a bit better. Okay, so this is adding the margin on the HTML side, but on the body side, that is where it would be visible to you, and it is adding a 8 pixel and a border. Don't really like the border. let's get rid of it. But you see the visual hierarchy: margin, border, and then comes the padding. Okay, the padding squeezes the content inside. So as per them, the suggestion is padding of 2 rem. So let's try that. And now, as you can see, the spacing between this and this has been squeezed. Now it says the term as 2 rem, and that translates to 32 pixels. So if I don't do 2 rem, I do a 32 pixels, that still should look visually the same. So that gives you an idea that 1 rem is 16 pixels. So if I go for, let's say, 64 pixels, how much rem would that be? Simple math. If my math is correct, it should be 4 rem. And there we go. So that squeezes the content in visually, understanding it. So margin on the outermost side, border in between, like below the margin, and then you have padding, which is going for like squeezing the content in. And then you have the content width, which is not something that you defined, but based on the how much content you actually have. Yeah, it shows the content width. Okay, so this is basically the width and the height of whatever text you have written, plus some. Okay, there's always a plus something else. And the next thing that they define is max width. So max width says that how much is the maximum that a user should see. So the default font size for most browsers is 16 pixels, right? So that's why our 2 rem was 32 pixels. So 38 rem is 608 pixels, which is 600 pixel displays at minimum. And there we go. That's defined. I don't want all the border things, so that goes away. And I want all of this to not be just here and go right on top to the HTML. And now from the whole page perspective, everything is center aligned, and it's just like visually much better. Like you can go on, you can go this to this, select any kind of phone, iPad, and everything should still be visible. Okay, perfectly visible. So you can say this is also kind of a responsive design that is added, uh, like without doing much. Like responsiveness is writing it for website, but making sure that it looks good on mobile. And in our case, it actually works out well. But if you scroll down on this page, there is a better version, which is for most of the displays, HTML. So I'm going to remove all of this. Max width is 70 ch. Now this is another uh, unit that you have. The ch is characters. Okay, so 70 ch is 70 characters at a time is what we want to see. Like in general, there is this theory of like, for not theory actually, for screen readers 70 characters is good enough for reading things. Padding is added, and this syntax is different. What is this? So we were doing padding of like 2 rem on all sides. Okay, but you can divide the padding as top, right, bottom, and left. So you can go like 2 rem on the top side, let's say 5 rem on the right, 10 rem on the bottom, and 20 rem on the left. I can do something like this. So if I take this down, as you can see, it is not exactly properly there, but if I hover over it, you see the idea. So padding Okay, padding is the second thing that get like just above the content. It squeezes the content in, if you remember. So it translates to this padding. Okay, top, right, bottom, and left. Now rem is a relative unit, depends on what is your default font base font size set. Based on that, it calculates your rem. Excuse me. I prefer pixels most of the times. So I'm going to go with 2 pixels, 5 pixels, 10 pixels, and 20 pixels. So in when I did rem before, as you can see, based on the calculation that has happened, it seems like uh, one rem here is 20. Yeah, 20 pixels. Okay, so that's why there's this 40, 100, 200, and 400. Okay, so top, right, bottom, left, that's how it gets applied. So what if I want same thing on the top and bottom, and what if I want the same thing on left and right? In that case, we can do a shorthand syntax, which is what they did, which was 3 and 1. Okay, so there's 3 and 1, which translates to 60 on the top, 60 on the bottom, 20 on the left, and 20 on the right. Okay, so that is your padding that they're adding. But if you noticed it, actually, they're not using rem, they're using m. Okay, look at this. It is not rem, it is m. So if I copy this over, come here and change this rem to m, this is the third thing that we actually are learning in terms of units. Okay, so the rem is relative to documents root. Okay, so what does that mean? Like based on the whole document, like what is the base font size set on the document, which in our case the browser has set it to be like 10. uh, the rem works, but the m, actually em, works based on the existing like who is the parent to this. So in our case, we actually say apply to it to html. There's no parent to the html, so html is the biggest thing, right? So doesn't really matter. But if let's say you apply a m tag to this h1, the parent of this h1 is this div, and the parent of this div is body, the parent of this body is html. So parent and child relation. So if you use a m tag in a h1, and if you have set a font size on this div to be like font size of 14 pixels, then it would do 14 multiplied by 3, and then it will change the text based on that. So that was one thing that I wanted to tell you. M, em. uh, Line height. So line height is between the text content. How much height do you want when it's on the like same kind of lines in a way? So if I copy this over a few more times, so this height between this first line and second line is what I'm talking about. So if I reduce this to 1, the height squeezes in, okay, between this text. 1.75 looks clear enough to read. And then the font size, okay, so the font size is set to be 1.25 m. So if I hover over this text, line height, font size, you can go over to something called as this computed tab in your browser, and you can see that the font size 1.2 m actually converts to 20 pixels. Okay, and it also shows you that the font it is rendering, it's Times Roman. Excuse me. So 1.25 m translates over to 20 pixels. And see, this is why I hate calculations most of the time. So I prefer to go with properly defined font sizes in pixels. So if I do 20 pixels, I know exactly how big it is. But when you do 1.25 m, then you have to do a whole calculation of uh, okay, what is exactly it? What is the base font size? So in our case, 20 divided by 1.25 would be 16. So the base font size is set at 16, and that is why 1.25 m is translated to 20 pixels. Okay, so I think that has been a very long style guide session. But there is one thing that I actually really like, uh, which was this particular comment by Swix. Okay, this is what I use most of the times. So I'm going to copy this over, going to leave it as is, except for one change. The max width, instead of 70 characters, I feel screens are wide enough to actually go up to 100 characters. So I normally just change that, and this is what we end up with. You can also notice the font difference, the font style difference here. So now this style for the paragraph is actually sans serif, and it renders Helvetica. And for the heading, it is actually Times Bold. Okay. And how does that come in? It just, you in the P tag, UL tag, and OL tag. Okay, it says that render a font family of sans serif. So if I copy this over to this one, whatever is the default font in your local machine, that's what gets shown here. There's also another change I would do here, the top margin. Okay, it's 3M. I think that's too much. Let's go with 1M. Actually, even that is too much. 0.5M. Okay, yep. This is what I like. The padding on the left and right, top bottom. Let's go that with 2M, 1M as well. Okay, so now this is much more on the top and centered, and it's easily readable. Okay, and if I try to make it responsive, if I try to squeeze in, as you can see, even on phones, this should be pretty much easily readable. So this is the final style that I have. Uh, Removing all these repetitions and everything. Oh, also it sets the color to this. Margin bottom would set the margin on the bottom side. Uh, since I have said that the font family is sans serif for all the H1 tags, all the P tags, I can add it to the parent. Who's the outermost parent? The HTML. So I can add the font family right here, and that should work for anything. So like div or any other thing like forms, when we add all those things, that should work out perfectly fine. And yep, this is the basic CSS which makes any website look good and be readable. Okay, so with that done, let me push this with, how do you push something? So the way we cloned it was git clone, and now when you have to push, you have to set your config. If this is your first time downloading git, you set your config, your username and user email. And I would say normally go for the username as on your GitHub account and your email as on your GitHub email. Okay, uh, and then follow the following commands. I would do a git add, and then do a git commit -m, And this is the feature, which was initial setup. And then close it, and then do a git push. Once pushed, it will show you that it has been pushed to this. And there we go, our fav icon, index.html, and style.css. So anyone and everyone who has been following along patiently for last 2 hours or something, uh, there's the latest code that we have written. And you can see the changes by going into this 4 commits that you see right here. That should show you all the commits that I have done, initial setup, and it shows you what changed. So previously this file did not exist, and now these lines got added. Previously this file did not exist, now these lines got added. If something changes, you can actually see it. Initial commit, this whole repository did not exist, this got added. Update readme, it shows what changed. So previously this repository was called this, like this title was this, that changed over to this. Okay, so let's, before the end of this session, let's actually get one of the semantic elements working properly. Now the semantic element that I'm interested in to getting it work is the nav element. Okay, the nav bar. So every website that you visit definitely has a nav bar, right? So what is your nav bar? That is the top bar on nearly every website, which allows you navigation. Well, unfortunately, this is not the best website to show that. But what is one of the best websites to show? MLH.io. So this top bar, that is, it's the navigation bar where you have these drop downs to go to multiple pages or go to other parts of the website, right? Our navigation bar. So let's build a navigation bar very quickly. Following the semantics, navigation bar comes on top of everything. So we know that if I put a navigation bar here, that should come above the div that I have. And inside that, what we have is a list. So I'm going to use a UL, which is an unordered list. You can find more details about what is unordered list or ordered list by going on to our reference page, right? The one from MDN. And if you search for UL here, yeah, represents an unordered list of items. But there is a better one right now, which you can use, which is a menu, a semantic alternative to UL. Okay, so let's see the difference. So first, like inside UL, it's an unordered list. And then inside that, I can have LIs, which is a list, single list item. Okay, and what pages will we have on our website? We will have so many, but let's start with some basic ones. We'll have a home page. Going to duplicate this. We'll have a Pomodoro timer. Going to duplicate this. We'll have box shadow generator, and we'll have, what else, library page. We'll have expense tracker. Okay, so that's our nav. And if I go over to a beginners week, there we go, UL with multiple LI. Instead of UL, there is another option called as OL, which is an ordered list, and that adds a number. You did not see me add numbers, but ordered list adds numbers. Wherever it starts from, it reads how many elements are there, adds numbers. Perfect. And the new thing is menu. So inside a nav bar, what you have is menu items, right? So as you can see, it works exactly same as UL. And if I go over to the code of it, you'll see inside the nav there's a menu, but the idea or the styling and everything remains the same. Okay. If I go to UL, exactly the same. No difference as such. But we'll go semantic, we'll use menu for now. Perfect. So that's done. And what else? I want to go over to different pages. So let's create a folder called as Pomodoro. This is where all the code of our Pomodoro timer will exist, right? Now inside this, I'm going to create a file called as pomodoro.html. What is the .html files? This is where we add the whole markup, right? Also, one last thing before we move ahead. If I take this nav item and put it below the div, just wanted to show that wherever you put it on the page is where it gets rendered. But if I put it outside the body, what do you think will happen? HTML does not really care. Okay. This is currently outside the body and it still works. What if I put it outside HTML as well? Now that's interesting. No, no, it is there apparently. So the page loaded and then the nav loaded. I think if I actually remove it for one bit, yep. So it's still part of the page. So it will still come back, but it is outside, should have been outside the body. But in the rendered page, it is inside the body. Yep. And why is that? Like, okay, removing the code injected from the live server. I'm going to stop the live server and I'm going to take this index.html, double click and open it. Yep. Inside this rendered page, my question to you all is why, if it's outside the body, did the browser think it is inside the body? The difference, like you can see in the network tab, if you go to index.html, HTML, body, and nav items. And right here, head, body, and inside the body is the nav item. Go figure it out. I would just say, like, one of the answers is that browsers actually read the whole page, and any mistakes that you have done tries to correct it out. Anyways, it goes back on top here, do research about that, and coming back. Okay, homepage. Yes, we are here. Uh, Going to go back to live server so that we have a live reload. Definitely hate to reload it. Head tag done, body tag done, nav elements done. Inside Pomodoro, if you have installed all the extensions, one of those extensions, I'm not sure which one, but if you do a semicolon, so exclamation mark, not semicolon, sorry. If you do a exclamation mark, actually you will get this suggestion, which should add some basics. Now there are a few things that it adds additionally, which we have not covered yet. So let's quickly cover it. So the first thing it adds additionally, which we did not do in our index.html, is the character set. So we are going to say that this is using the UTF-8 character set. Okay. Oh, apparently it's built into VS Code. Yeah, possibly. I just remember that I do a single exclamation and it works out. Not sure which extension got it. Uh, but yeah, probably it's VS Code. If you do a triple extension, it adds doc type HTML. Uh, Triple exclamation. Even double works actually. Hmm. Okay. So single one gives you this initial setup where language is set, head tag is set, a body empty body tag exists. So meta tag UTF character set is 8. There are multiple character sets. This is kind of to tell the browser that whatever you render on screen is something which comes from the UTF-8 character set. You can read more about UTF-8, but the idea is the current language system, like not language system, the current browser settings for showing characters to the user is by using this UTF-8 character set. You also have UTF-16, you have UTF-32, you have other, like you have ASCII. So all of them are basically versions, or no, actually types of how do you render the text on screen. The second thing it adds is this name, like the viewport. So what is this? This tells that the width of the page should be equal to device width. And initially, it should be not zoomed in or zoomed out. It should be 1.0, like exactly whatever width is the page. If you do it like the initial scale as like 4.0 or something, so that is by kind of saying that you're zoomed in or zoomed out in a way. You'll have to also add a min scale and max scale. I am not exactly sure about the syntax here. So I'll have to Google that as well. I just remember that you have a zoomed in version of it, you have a zoomed out version of it. Uh, I think I don't want the CSS. Maybe that would help. Okay. I think this should work mostly on phone better. Hmm. Ideally, I think this works out better on phone. Oh yeah, there we go. So as soon as I go into responsive, it is going in here. Initial scale if I set to 1.0 and the maximum scale as 5.0, I think. Not sure. Yep. Initial scale, now when I set it to 1.0, that's this. And if I set the initial scale as 4.0, zoomed in. So that tells you that, you know, I want the website to open as a zoomed in version or on the exact version. So that is for the initial scale. The maximum scale is how much zoomed in it should go. Not really needed. Okay, perfect. So now initial scale is 1.0 and this works out fine. If I do like another way to show it is if it's 2.0, slightly zoomed in. If it is 8.0, that's a bit more, okay, a bit much. So that's your initial scale. And let's add back our styles. And that is perfectly fine. So these are two more things that it adds. Then it adds the title tag, which we actually know what it does. So in our case, we would say this is Pomodoro Timer. Inside the body, I would tag one div tag, and inside that there would be one h1, which would be Pomodoro Timer. Okay. Now, from our home page, whenever someone clicks on this is a menu item, right? So if I click on the menu item button, then it should navigate me to a particular page. So if I go over to this Pomodoro timer and I click on it as a button, like or as a link, let's say, it should navigate to this folder, this file. And to do that, we have a very special syntax which is called as an A tag. Okay. So I'm going to cut this, hit enter, and show you A tag. A tag is a hyperlink, and what it says is you can reference to another file. So I will say that go over to slash Pomodoro folder and pomodoro.html, close it, and inside here I will say the name of, like, what name should it render. So now if I go over here, you can see it's like highlighted in blue. If I click, then it goes over to the Pomodoro Timer web page. And if I hit back, we are back here. So similarly, now the task for you all is to do the same for home. What should be for the home? Okay, I'll also show you for home. Home, you could do multiple things here. You could say that go over to slash index.html. Whenever someone clicks on home, it should go to index.html. But we know that you don't really need to do index.html, because that is the first file that the browser reads. So you can do a simple forward slash and click on this. It is still on this page. The slash index.html is gone, but the website still works. And another way to test it is removing everything from here, hitting enter comes back to home page. So two things are done. Similarly, create folders for box shadow generator, for library page, and expense tracker. That is the, I will again say, homework uh, that you can do between the break that you will get right now. So this is the end of my session, and now go and enjoy MS Paint uh, with Bob Ross, right? So you have a mini event on Discord where you can join Bob Ross MS Paint and have some fun. And after that, after 1 hour, I'll be back for the next section of continuing this and building more projects. Okay. Cheers, everyone. Bye bye. Enjoy.